Recently, Prime Minister Mark Carney delivered a forceful performance at a press conference in London. The moment came when a reporter pressed him with the criticism that he was simply flying around the world without achieving anything concrete.
Conservatives say you are jetting around but getting nothing done. You've met with numerous leaders while you've been here, but you're not signing a new deal or announcing a new partnership. What have you achieved tangibly for Canadians during this trip?
Instead of avoiding the question, Carney pointed to new trade deals, fresh partnerships, and meetings with global investment leaders.
We are focused on building a new web of trade relationships around the globe. In June, Canada signed the EU Strategic Partnership for the Future to deepen trade and mutual economic security. Last week in Mexico, I worked with President Sheinbaum to launch a new Canada-Mexico action plan to build fresh economic opportunities for our workers and businesses. Now, while in the UK, I've met with business and investment leaders to discuss new economic opportunities and partnerships as we look to attract capital to Canada.
What looked like a challenge quickly turned into a showcase of strategy. At the very moment Washington is erecting trade barriers, Canada is presenting itself as an open destination for capital and new alliances. This scene matters because Canadians at home are anxious. Jobs are being threatened by U.S. tariffs, and many families are worried about rising costs. Carney's response in London was aimed not only at the journalist in the room, but also at those Canadians who want reassurance that their government is acting with urgency and direction. Carney emphasized that Canada is not waiting for opportunity to arrive at its door. In London and New York, he met with some of the world's largest infrastructure funds, the type of global investors that finance projects from energy to digital networks. His message was simple. Canada is building a modern economy and needs hundreds of billions of dollars in investment over the next decade. Ottawa has already taken steps to back that ambition. In its first 4 months, the government cut personal income taxes for more than 22 million Canadians and reduced capital gains taxes. It removed federal barriers to interprovincial trade to create what Carney calls one Canadian economy. It passed legislation to fast-track approvals for energy, artificial intelligence, critical minerals, and trade infrastructure. And it launched Build Canada Homes to double the pace of residential construction. These policies, coupled with outreach to investors, are meant to attract capital that might otherwise hesitate in today's uncertain climate. While President Trump is pursuing tariffs that unsettle markets, Canada is telling investors that it offers stability, predictability, and the chance to grow long-term careers for Canadian workers. For investors, the signal is clear. Canada is not only lowering domestic barriers, but also promising access to growing export markets. International funds are increasingly drawn to places where governments act quickly to approve projects and provide clarity on taxation. By placing these reforms front and center, Carney is sending a message that global capital is welcome and will be safeguarded. Beyond capital flows, Ottawa is widening its trade horizons. In September, Canada signed its first bilateral trade agreement with an ASEAN country. The deal with Indonesia reduces or eliminates tariffs on 95% of Canadian exports to a nation of more than 270 million people that is projected by the International Monetary Fund to become the fifth largest economy in the world within 2 decades. Days earlier, Carney launched the Canada-Mexico Action Plan, setting a path for joint economic initiatives as both countries prepare for the scheduled review of the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Agreement. In Europe, Canada signed a strategic partnership for the future in June, and negotiations are already in a second phase. The framework is linked to Europe's new SAFE initiative and the Rearm Europe plan, both of which involve hundreds of billions of euros in infrastructure and defense spending. Each of these steps moves Canada further from reliance on a single market. Trump's tariffs were designed to pressure Ottawa, yet in practice, they have accelerated Canada's turn toward Asia, Europe, and Mexico. What was meant to isolate has instead pushed Canada to diversify. The contrast is striking. In Washington, new tariffs are being announced on pharmaceuticals, furniture, and heavy trucks, creating fresh waves of uncertainty. In London, Carney is describing a Canada that is opening new doors, signing deals, and presenting itself as a partner for the future. A question that might have put him on the defensive instead became an opportunity to underline a broader message. Canada is not shrinking under pressure. It is using that very pressure to expand its reach, reduce its dependence, and strengthen its economy. For Canadians, the outcome of these moves will be measured in jobs, investment, and long-term security. For the United States, it is a reminder that trade wars often come with unintended consequences.
All I got from the United Nations was an escalator that on the way up stopped right in the middle, and then a teleprompter that didn't work. These are the two things I got from the United Nations, a bad escalator and a bad teleprompter. It's time to end the failed experiment of open borders. You have to end it now. Let's see, I can tell you. I'm really good at this stuff. Your countries are going to hell.
Trump has just made a fool of himself on the world stage. At the United Nations in New York, two very different images of leadership have emerged. On one side, President Donald Trump turned his address to the world into a spectacle that blended personal grievances with campaign slogans. He spoke about broken teleprompters, escalators that stalled, and his belief that he deserves a Nobel Peace Prize. The moment that should have showcased American vision became a reminder of how unpredictable and unfocused the White House has become. On the other side, Prime Minister Mark Carney used his own stage in New York to underline Canada's role in global trade and cooperation. He framed his country as a partner ready to fill the vacuum when others retreat. The contrast is sharp, and it tells us something important about where economic and political credibility now lies. Trump's remarks at the UN were not a roadmap for foreign policy. They were a repeat of familiar domestic talking points. He warned that countries were going to hell. He dismissed clean energy as a scam, and he exaggerated his own achievements. The substance that leaders expect from the American president was missing. Instead of building support for U.S. initiatives, he gave the impression of a leader caught in grievance politics. Behind the theatrics sits a deeper reality. Trump's reciprocal tariffs, rolled out earlier this year, were sold as a tool to reset global trade. Yet their effect has been mixed at best. The U.S. International Trade Commission noted in a September update that sectors like autos and metals have faced supply chain disruptions, while consumer groups warn of rising costs in key imports. Rather than projecting economic strength, the president's speech highlighted the gap between his promises and the economic evidence. Beyond trade, the credibility gap is widening. Federal Reserve surveys released this fall show that small manufacturers report lower new orders compared to 2024, citing tariff-driven price hikes as a major reason. Supply chains that once flowed through Japan and Korea are now stalling because negotiations remain unresolved. These are not abstract numbers. They mean delayed shipments, higher costs for U.S. consumers, and fewer investment commitments in American factories. Trump promised that tariffs would unlock a wave of new jobs and capital, but the evidence from official agencies shows strain instead of revival. While Trump wandered through tangents at the UN, Carney was busy shaping a different narrative in New York.
We have the resources the world needs. We have the talent to turn that potential into growth. We're a reliable partner.
Speaking at policy forums, he emphasized that Canada has the resources, the technology, and the alliances to thrive even in a fractured trading system. He pointed to agreements with Mexico and talks with the European Union as steps to secure markets beyond the U.S. His tone was not dramatic but deliberate. He tied Canada's energy output, critical minerals, and investment potential into a strategy meant to reassure both investors and allies. Where Trump leaned on anecdotes about construction contracts and campaign slogans, Carney leaned on the fundamentals of economic credibility. This divergence matters. In a moment when global markets look for signals, one leader projected confusion while the other projected stability. The United Nations stage has long been where American presidents outline their vision for the world. This year, the stage revealed something else. Trump's reliance on theatrics, personal stories, and exaggerated claims has turned a serious platform into an echo of domestic rallies. Instead of reinforcing the case for his tariff strategy, his words exposed its weakness. They showed a leader searching for validation while allies and rivals alike questioned the direction of U.S. policy. Carney, by contrast, used the same setting to advance a coherent message about trade and partnership. His approach did not make headlines for odd tangents or technical mishaps. It made headlines because it was steady and forward-looking. For Canadians, it was a chance to show that they can carry responsibility on the global stage. For Americans, it was a reminder that when theater replaces strategy, credibility is the first casualty.
71% of Canadian consumers say they intend to buy fewer American products this year.
Canada is a very tough country to deal with.
It's got some staying power. When Trump calls us the 51st state as a deliberate insult, it is amplified on social media. And so he's actually keeping it top of mind. He's keeping the boycott going.
It began with a remark that shook Canadians. In February, President Trump triggered a trade war and suggested Canada might be America's 51st state. What could have been dismissed as political theater struck a nerve. By spring, surveys showed 71% of Canadians plan to reduce purchases of American goods in 2025. Economists cited by CNBC warned the boycott could slice 0.3% from U.S. GDP this year, about $90 billion in lost output. Walking into grocery stores in Ontario or Quebec, the shift is plain to see. Where displays once overflowed with U.S. corn and berries, shelves now carry Canadian flags and Made in Canada labels. What began as consumer frustration has turned into a movement of economic nationalism. The message is simple. If there is a Canadian choice, that is the choice people will make.
The pressure is most obvious in food and drink. At Vince's Market, a Toronto-based chain serving 30,000 weekly customers, managers said that during Canada's off-season, they once relied on American produce for up to 70% of their stock. Today, that share has dropped to about 30%. Apps like MapleScan help shoppers verify origin and encourage them to favor local substitutes. Losses are clear in agriculture and beverages. Canada was the United States' second-largest food export market in 2024, worth $28.4 billion. California wines once filled 30 to 40% of red wine sales in Canadian shops. That revenue, about $60,000 a week for some stores, has evaporated. Provinces imposed a 25% tariff on U.S. alcohol this March, and bottles vanished from shelves. Imports of distilled spirits from the U.S., valued at $221 million in 2024, are being replaced by supplies from France, South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand. American farmers and vintners who depended on cross-border sales are watching demand collapse.
The boycott is not confined to products. Travel has become another front. In 2024, 20 million Canadians visited the United States and spent $20.5 billion. This year, the flow is shrinking rapidly. Online searches for U.S. trips from Canada dropped 50% in the spring. Land crossings in March were down almost 30% year-over-year, while air travel fell 22% in June, according to CBC. For border economies, this is a crisis. Restaurants, retail outlets, and hotels in Windsor and Detroit, or Buffalo and New York State, report vanishing traffic. The U.S. Travel Association estimated America is on track to lose $12.5 billion in international visitor spending in 2025 compared with last year. Local businesses describe empty parking lots and declining revenues with no clear path to recovery.
The White House insists tariffs are making America stronger, yet for U.S. companies watching their Canadian sales disappear, the picture looks very different. While Japan and the European Union have signed new tariff frameworks and South Korea remains in talks, Canada is drifting further away. Instead of cooling tensions, Trump's rhetoric often reignites them. By repeating provocative statements and doubling down on trade barriers, he has helped keep the boycott alive. The result is a cycle of loss. American producers are squeezed, border towns are weakened, and international travelers are looking elsewhere. Even in Europe, early signs show consumers turning away from U.S. brands, suggesting the damage is not limited to North America. For Canadians, the Buy Canadian movement has become a unifying act of resistance. For Americans, it is a warning that tariffs and insults can cost dearly in jobs, sales, and reputation. Trump promised to put America first. The irony is that his approach has left America losing ground in its closest and most reliable market. The boycott that started in Canada is proving durable, and the costs are mounting day by day.